You've probably heard that France once left NATO, right? Well, that's not the full story. In 1966, France didn't pull out of the alliance entirely. It just withdrew from NATO's integrated military command structure. It's a subtle but super important difference. France still promised to defend its allies if they were attacked, but it wanted to call its own shots. So, why did they do it? The man behind this bold move was French President Charles de Gaulle. He was a proud nationalist and wasn't thrilled with the way NATO was set up. From its creation, NATO's supreme allied commander in Europe was always an American, and the deputy was always British. De Gaulle saw this as a sign of Anglo-American dominance and felt it undermined France's sovereignty and prestige. He famously declared he didn't want France's fate decided in Washington, D.C. He was determined to restore France's strategic independence. A big part of this was about control over military forces. De Gaulle didn't want French soldiers taking orders from foreign generals. Think about it, sending your country's troops into battle is a huge decision, and he wanted that decision to be made in Paris, not by a NATO commander. This wasn't a new concern. In fact, a decade earlier, France had already pulled its Mediterranean naval fleet from NATO command for similar reasons. It was all about autonomy. Then there was the nuclear issue. France was developing its own independent nuclear deterrent, the force de Frappe. De Gaulle worried that being part of NATO's integrated command would make France dependent on the US nuclear umbrella and American strategy. He believed that in a crisis, the United States might not be willing to risk its own cities to defend Europe. An independent nuclear force meant France could defend its own interests, on its own terms, without needing anyone's permission. This desire for independence extended to conventional forces too. France wanted full control over its military tactics, equipment, procurement, and overall defense policy. So, in 1966, de Gaulle made his move. He formally announced France's withdrawal from the integrated command. He then went a step further and demanded that all foreign troops and military headquarters leave French soil. This caused a bit of a diplomatic stir, especially with the United States. NATO headquarters, which had been just outside Paris since 1952, had to pack up and move to Brussels, where it remains today. The US also had to remove its military bases and, crucially, its nuclear weapons from French territory. You might think this would be a controversial decision back home, but it was actually incredibly popular with the French public. The idea of la grandeur, the greatness and independence of France. The policy was so popular, in fact, that it was maintained by successive French governments. For the rest of the 20th century, France was charting its own course, a third way between the two superpower blocs of the Cold War. Now, here's a fascinating twist. Despite this very public and dramatic break, de Gaulle wasn't completely cutting ties. He secretly signed agreements with the US, known as the La Mitzoralata. These laid out a plan for how French forces would coordinate with NATO, and essentially rejoin the command structure if the Soviet Union ever actually invaded Western Europe. So, in public, it was all about independence. But behind the scenes, there was a pragmatic plan for a worst-case scenario. So, how did the US react to all this? Publicly, there was frustration. President Lyndon B. Johnson was reportedly quite annoyed, but privately, the American stance was one of reluctant acceptance. The thinking was that NATO was strong enough to survive without France's full participation in the command structure. There was also a belief, which turned out to be correct, that France would eventually come back into the fold. And that's exactly what happened. As the Cold War ended and global security challenges changed, France began to slowly The process started in the 1990s and culminated in 2009, when President Nicolas Sarkozy announced France's full return to NATO's integrated military command. The era of French exceptionalism within the alliance had come to a close, ending a unique chapter in NATO's history that all started with one man's vision for his country's independence. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time.